Radio Cardiff
98.7 FM.
Right, I'd like to introduce you to Darren Williams. He is the prospective candidate for the Riverside ward.
Yep.
OK. Darren, first of all, tell me where you come from and where you live, your basic Darren facts.
OK. Well, I was born in Aberdeen and I've lived all over South Wales, basically apart from a couple of years when I was away at university. I lived in Cardiff for 12 years and I work for the PCS Civil Service Trade Union.
Wow. Well, we've got a lot of things in common because I lived in Aberdeen for quite a few years in the 80s, victim of the crash of the 80s, so came to live in Cardiff.
Yeah.
I came from Birmingham in the 60s and the 70s, you know, so I've lived all more or less the same as you. Indeed. So where would you were born in Aberdeen?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Wow.
Both sides of my family are from the Cynon Valley. My mother's family from Aberdeen, my dad's family from Mountain Ash.
It's a bit different, isn't it, Aberdeen to Cardiff?
Yeah, just a bit, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, they've both got their strengths, haven't they?
Indeed.
Yeah, like I said, I've lived all over South Wales, really, so, yeah, I've got a sort of fairly broad perspective on it.
And where do you live at the moment?
I live in Canton, actually, on Lansdowne Road, so just over the border from Riverside. I did live in the Riverside ward for 9 years on Wellington Street.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And I still work in the ward. I work at Transport House on Cathedral Road.
Oh, wow. That's lovely. So we've got a lot of things in common. Geographically, we've got things in common. However, there's something about the geography of the Riverside ward in inverted commas, because really we've got Posh Canna and we've got Riverside. There's two distinct little areas divided by Cowbridge Road.
Indeed.
What do you think about that? How do you feel about having a fairly affluent area of Pontcanna being lumped in with the poor area of inner city Riverside?
Well, I mean, I think it's a very broad and diverse community, and one of the things I like about the area is the fact that you've got people from so many different backgrounds, and obviously it's a very ethnically diverse ward in the south, people from all different kinds of communities there. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, as you say, is it's very divided sort of socioeconomically, and in a way it's a kind of microcosm of the divisions in Cardiff and in Wales and in the UK more generally, where there are those sort of that gap between rich and poor, if you like, and it presents a challenge for somebody that wants to represent a ward like that, where there are big differences between people in the two halves of the ward. But then there are also things that bring people together. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody is dependent on the services that the council and government at all levels provide. Everybody's using the same services, as the same roads, the same schools, and so on. So I think there are things that unite people as well as things that sort of set them apart.
Yes, a lot of people don't realise that there's 44 different languages spoken in our high school in what's Fitzalan?
Yeah, indeed.
And in Riverside, in our primary school, Kitchener Road, we've got at least 22 different nationalities in the nursery.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the Welsh language, though, Darren?
I mean, I think the Welsh language is very important. I mean, I'm committed to supporting the Welsh language. I mean, I wish I'd learned Welsh in school. I did it for a couple of years, and then I'm not a natural linguist. I did drop it, but I think Welsh is important to our identity as a nation. I'm glad that the long-term decline of the Welsh language was sort of arrested and then started to be reversed from the 1980s onwards. And I do support measures to promote the Welsh language.
Yeah, and indeed you've got quite a lot of S4C people up in Pontcanna, haven't you?
That's right, yeah.
Right, so one of the little things that sort of gets my goat, if there's a real expression like that, is the fact that some things like the Riverside Community Gardens are actually based in Pontcanna and quite a long way away from Riverside, and it's run from Ninian Park Road. But for the benefit, really, more geographically, for the people of Pontcanna, I find that discrepancy a little bit sad. What can you do to encourage more growing of fruit and veg in Riverside itself? How do you feel about that?
No, I think that's a very good point. I mean, it is a challenge. I mean, it's not geographically a great distance, but I think because of the sort of cultural disconnect, if you like, to a certain extent, South Riverside and Pontcanna are seen as two different communities, and then I guess people from the south don't tend to go that far to the north of the ward, and I think we need to encourage people to do that, to make that sort of journey. But we should look at sort of alternatives whereby people can have that kind of facility on their doorstep in South Riverside as well. Well, I don't know how you go about that.
Well, we've got quite a lot of green, if you think about it carefully. We've got dispenser gardens, Clare gardens, we've got Kitchener Park. There's little pockets of green around.
That's true.
But unfortunately, most of it's just been grassed over, and there's no actual tree planting or shrub planting to make those areas attractive. What would you think about tenants like myself, because I'm a council tenant,
Yeah, sure.
developing community gardens within our little council estates? Like I live in Edinburgh Court.
Sure.
There's a lot of people in South Morgan Place and Railway Terrace with lots of green areas that could be made much more productive if we had little gardening projects. What do you think about those ideas?
That sounds like an excellent idea. Yeah, I'd be very interested to see, how we could go about getting the council to support that kind of initiative.
Okay. Right, some of the questions that have been brought to my attention, the issues rather, from my walks around Riverside, are street cleaning. It's a bit dangerous, in the wet and windy autumn to have all those leaves. What do you think about the council officers' policy that's been, I don't know how long it's been in you haven't been in power very long in Cardiff, really. No. We had a coalition the last time, didn't we? But it's been said that you are not going to sweep the leaves up anymore. So these gather on the streets, hide the litter and the grass that's underneath them, and accidents are occurring when they get slippy and wet. What can you do to appease the anger of the residents who are victims of this horrible litter and leafage?
Well, I think first of all there have been improvements in street cleaning in general. Under the current Labour Council. I think the statistics show in the last year of the previous Liberal Democrat Plaid Cymru administration, the state of the streets in areas like Riverside and the city centre was particularly bad, and there have been major improvements where more resources have been devoted to areas like Riverside. The teams that empty the bins and pick up litter and so on have been increased, and I think most people would recognise that there have been improvements. The situation with the leaves, I don't know. I can certainly understand why people feel concerned about that. I often sort of go jogging around the ward, and as the weather's changed and there have been more leaves on the ground, I've been concerned about the danger of slipping, and obviously we've got ice now as it's getting colder. So no, absolutely. It is something that needs to be addressed. So I to be honest, I don't know exactly what the council position on that is, or what the rationale is for it. But I would certainly be concerned about something that did present those kind of dangers that you identify. Absolutely,
and it hides all the dog fouling too.
There is that, yeah.
So there's lots of different things about street litter. Right, another issue is recycling, the ability to recycle and the confusing nature of the bins. If you live in an individual property or a terraced house or a ground floor flat, you might have access to the little brown bins for your food.
Yeah.
People in communal properties have to use bags and then put it in a communal brown bin. Then there's the green bins that are actually for garden waste, and some people think it's for your green bag recycling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's very confusing, the recycling. What would you do if you were elected to ameliorate that problem?
I think the main thing is education, is making sure that people have the information so that they're clear about which bins they should be using for which kinds of collection and which times. Clearly there are a number of things that need to be balanced. I think it's right that the council's been pushing greater emphasis on recycling as opposed to the standard black bag collection. This country is very poor by international comparisons in terms of the amount that we do recycle. We do still just throw far too much away that just goes to landfill. So I think it was a good thing that actually we went to just the fortnightly black bag collection.
But aren't we going up to a month now?
Well, that's just a proposal. There is a consultation that's still open at the moment that people can go on the council website and so on and give their own views. And I understand people have perfectly reasonable concerns about that monthly collection, but that is just one idea. And I think my suspicion is that people won't want to see that happen. And I can't guarantee anything, but I wouldn't have thought that the council would pursue a policy like that against overwhelming opposition. I don't think it's the road we should be going down.
Well, it's totally inappropriate for communal for properties like our estates when you've got communal bins for 56, 72 properties.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. The point you made about the different kinds of bins for different properties. Clearly, some kinds of bins are more appropriate for certain properties. But yeah, you're absolutely right. What we don't want. We've got concerns about cleanliness, hygiene, and just safety, and those things are just as important as the need to recycle and also the need to make good use of resources. But yeah, I think all those considerations need to be taken into account.
It's a special Friday breakfast show today, listener, because we have got a by-election coming up in the Riverside and Pontcanna ward. It's called the Riverside ward, but it includes Pontcanna. And we've had a few questions in from the listener. How can the prospective councillor justify the closure of the Wyndham Street Diner in Wyndham Street, Riverside? There are over 100 signatures on a petition and many letters of protest to save this valuable resource. What do you think about closure of the Wyndham Street Diner?
Okay, so this is the lunch club for older people that's been run, and I know is very popular and very successful. I mean, I wouldn't seek to justify. I would like to see it kept open. I mean, the situation is that because of the cuts that the UK Tory Lib Dem government is imposing, the council is in a position of having to cut direct funding to third sector organisations, and so hopefully it will continue, but in a different form. I mean, at the moment it's got transition funding that will take it up to the end of the financial year, but even with that, the danger at the moment is that it will go down from 5 days a week to 3 days a week in February. And Iona Gordon, one of our Labour councillors in Riverside, is planning a fundraising event before Christmas, which I'll be helping her with, to try and raise. If we just raise £1,000, we can keep it open for 4 days instead of just 3. But in the longer term, when the current financial year comes to an end, the council will be putting it out for tender for another organisation to run that service. And I think the important thing is that the people who run the service at the moment so successfully need to be able to try and continue to run it, albeit on a different basis. And I think that it's important that they are encouraged and supported to speak to communities first about converting it into a social enterprise, and then the people who've been doing that work up to now will hopefully be able to continue with that. So,
yeah, because it's Nancy and I can't remember Craig do a very good job, and they cater for a lot of the older persons. And we have to think in these winter months, times are hard. £3.50 for a 2-course meal and as much tea and coffee as you can drink is wonderful for the pensioners.
Yeah, that's right.
And also they do get vest transport to and from Grangetown. So it's not just Riverside people who use that facility,
exactly.
because it's so reasonable, and fresh produce every day. You're guaranteed your 5 a day and all that.
That's right, and it's not just the food, it's the sort of social aspect as well. They get to talk to other people and so on. So I think it is important we do everything we can to ensure that service is still available in the future, albeit provided on a different basis.
That's good to hear, but try and keep the local people who
Absolutely.
started it off in the jobs for local people.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's another question. This is about Canton, really, but it's weird because part of Riverside does border on Cowbridge Road East, which includes the shops
Yeah.
opposite. Oh dear, and it's called Canton, and it's really Riverside, and it's really Pontcanna. So, who decided to get rid of the curbs along the pavements in Canton on the main drag up the Cowbridge Road? The road and pavement are at the same level now, and it's dangerous for the visually impaired and small children.
It's a difficult one. I don't know what the rationale behind that decision was, to be honest with you. That's something. Obviously, when you're standing for council, there's a lot of issues that come up, and it's impossible to be an expert on all of them from the outset. But I will certainly investigate that and find out.
Thank you very much. So we've done Nancy's Diner. Well, we've already talked about the multiracial, multicultural area that is Riverside. What do you think about the fact that most of the pubs in the Riverside area have disappeared? There's plenty up in Pontcanna, up Cathedral Road, and in the estate of Pontcanna, but virtually everything's gone. The nearest pub to me in Riverside by Wellington Street is the Westgate.
Yeah.
Down by the Transport House.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the loss of that important facility for the people who like a tipple?
Oh, I think it's a real problem. I mean, of course, it's not something that is unique to Riverside by any means. We've seen, thousands of pubs close around the UK, over the last few years. It's a consequence of the recession. A lot of businesses, as you know, have not been able to continue, and we have seen some pubs in the kind of Pontcanna / Canton end of the ward shut down as well. But you're right, not nearly as many. I mean, I guess in a relatively more affluent area, then they're more likely to be able to survive under these difficult circumstances. But I just think it shows, the difficult financial situation that everybody's been in since the financial crash in 2008, 2009, and the fact that unfortunately, particularly under this UK government, there hasn't been the support in the economy to get businesses moving moving again, and to make sure that people have got money in their pocket to spend in pubs and in other local facilities.
Okay, thank you for that, Darren. One of my final question, and then I'll let you sum up your own and sell yourself again. The other issue is the proliferation of single persons accommodation within the area, and we've got a needle exchange and a substance misuse centre, which I support entirely, because there is a lot of substance misuse going on in society in general, not just from the poor working classes, but within the middle classes as well. You know, there's cocaine misuse. Lots of substance misuse, heroin misuse. And we've got a lot of facilities right in the heart of Riverside, and yet there seems to be needles dropped in the streets still and things like that. What do you think about that new centre on Dispenser Garden near the two parks? Do you think it's a good location?
Well, I think that these are important facilities, as you say. We need to be able to support people who've got drug problems. I think you have to have the facilities close to where people need them, to make use of that support. And I think that if there are problems with needles being found on the streets, then clearly that's something that the council needs to address. But I think it's important to support these kind of facilities.
Okay, and we've got these new neighbourhood management committees. As a prospective councillor, what do you think about that restructuring that the Labour Council have actually helped put through to create these neighbourhood management committees, where actual people from the communities are not represented, and we have to rely on councillors and officers of the council to determine what goes on in our communities? How does that fix in with participatory democracy?
Well, I mean, I think as you say, it's potentially problematic if people aren't having a direct say about their own circumstances, and I think that's something that I would want to look at. If I'm elected, I do think that it's important that people do get to make the decisions that affect their own circumstances, and so
or be involved, at least be involved.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay then, Darren, have you enjoyed your little visit to Radio Cardiff?
I have indeed. Thank you very much.
You've had your half hour. So sum up in a couple of minutes what you're going to do for us people in Pontcanna and Riverside.
Well, I think, as I've already mentioned, the context that we're in is that you've got a government in Westminster that is, I think, carrying out policies that are not in the interests of ordinary people in areas like Riverside or anywhere else for that matter, where they're not getting the economy moving again after the economic crash. They're cutting public services deeper than we've ever seen before. And unfortunately, the council's in a position where it's had cuts foisted on it, and it's got to make some very difficult choices over the next few months with the budget coming up, but over the next couple of years as well. I think it's important that we've got a Labour Council that's trying to do its best under difficult circumstances. We've got some very strong Labour councillors in Riverside, in Iona Gordon and Cecilia Love. I want to work with them to make sure that the voice of local people is heard. I think it's important we work together as a team. It's easy to criticise when you're in opposition, but I think when you're in a position where you've got to make those difficult choices, then that's where you can have a real influence. So on that basis, I would want to be part of that team, helping ensure that ordinary people's voices are heard in Cardiff, and that the right decisions are made, and that we work in partnership with the Welsh Labour Government in the Assembly as well.
Darren Williams, thank you very much for coming to Radio Cardiff. I hope you keep to those pledges to our listeners. They've all heard you now.
Indeed.
So go on. Good luck with the election. We have interviewed Plaid Cymru already. We've offered the opportunity to the Liberal Democrats, but sadly Sophie, the candidate, is away this week and she can't come in next week. We've also asked the Tory party, but they haven't responded. Okay. So thank you very much for taking the time out to come and talk to Radio Cardiff.
Thank you, Georgina.
Thank you very much, Darren. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Radio Cardiff.